Hi guys, how you doing? Just going to start having a go at recording a video for you all so that we can start having a look at this Unit 20, which is the next unit that we're going to be doing into the second year. Just a little starter, what I'd like you to think about is these 6 places that we've got here. So we've got Edinburgh, Sunderland, Hull, Liverpool, Belfast and Plymouth, all on the UK, in the UK. So what we start to think about is where are these places and what links them and what do they have in common. So as we start to look at these particular places, here is Plymouth, which we should be quite familiar with. And we have a picture here of Liverpool. And you might start to get an idea as to what we're beginning to look at. Here's Belfast. And again, think about what's the familiar, the common theme. And then we have Hull. So, have you got any idea as to what it is that we're going to be looking at for this particular unit? Well, the answer sits just here. Here we have the locations of the 6 cities. And what we can see is that they're all located on the coastlines. And what we actually find is that 10 of the 21 largest cities in the UK are by the coast, and this is a huge number of cities and a large population that sits within a coastal region, and this puts a lot of pressure onto the UK coastline as a whole. So what we're going to begin to think about in this unit is our relationship as humans with the natural environment and the coastal environment around the UK as an island, and how we can go about managing that relationship in a more sustainable manner. So these particular cities, the 6 of them, all have vast marine economies. And what you should think about at this point is, what are those economies going to be and what do they include? So what you might want to do now is just quickly stop the video and have a quick jot down of the economies that link to these cities. Okay, now what we're going to do at this point, once you've done that, is we're going to move forward through these particular economies that we tend to find in these places. So the first one, and again this is a picture of Plymouth, is that we have ferries and cruise liners that use the coastal environments and they use the ports. We have a large amount of cargo transportation. In fact, 95% of the imports into this country, which includes things like food and goods, are imported on boats like this, containing these big containers. We have fisheries, big fisheries in the southwest with Plymouth and Brixham being 2 of the largest fisheries in the UK. Recreational boating, and this is again another big industry for Plymouth as a city. We have Princess Yachts, who produce large boats, but we also have large marinas that contain smaller yachts as well, and a big industry around that linked to tourism. We also have one of the largest naval bases in Plymouth, in the Western Europe, essentially. So this takes up a huge amount of our coastal region in the city. And if you include then other coastal regions within the UK, such as Portsmouth and Faslane in Scotland, there's a big naval presence on our coastline in the UK. So what we start to think about in this particular unit is we're going to start to look at coastal threats. So things that basically threaten the natural coastline and the quality of the ecosystems that sit within these regions. And these can be broken down into 2 main categories, and you need to know this for your first assignment. The first of these are natural threats, and the second is the human threats. Now what I'd like to do at this point, again, is just to pause the video and start to jot down the natural and the human threats, just a list of each of them. So natural, these are threats that essentially humans don't tend to have much influence over, directly that is. And then obviously human threats are things that we cause. We actually do these things either deliberately or not deliberately. So pause the video now, make a list of each, and then I'll go through the answers in a second. Okay, so hopefully you've done that now. You've got a list. What I'm going to do is just quickly jot through some of the examples I've got, and maybe you'll have some others that I won't have thought about. Okay, there's the task. And okay, so what I got, these are some of my answers. So some of the natural processes that I got include things like temperature. So hot and cold temperatures can have a big influence on the coastline, leading to erosion. And these, when combined with things like wind and wave power, can cause vast erosion processes that cause landslides, cliffs to fall, etc. Beaches can disappear completely. Now, erosion is a natural process. We have to realise that. And what we're going to begin to look at in this unit is how erosion happens over time, and how we can manage that. One of the other things that we might link to this is sea level change. Sea level change is linked to human behaviour in the sense that we are driving climate change through carbon emissions, but we don't cause the sea levels to change directly. So we class it as a natural threat in this particular case. Sea level changes could cause coastal flooding, and coastal flooding could lead to impacts not just on direct coastal habitats, but it may lead to flooding of areas around this. Perhaps if we look at the east of England, where it's very flat, it could cause flooding of large wetlands that are freshwater, but also land areas like fields and things like that as well, grasslands. Linked to this is extreme weather. So what we will start to see, and we have seen, is the increase in the number of storms. Storm events bring in a lot of wind and wave power and increase that erosion, and they can damage ecosystems. And another one that's also, again, linked to climate change is the introduction of invasive species. Now, this isn't something that tends to happen on purpose. People don't tend to introduce invasive species deliberately. But as the temperatures and the climates change around the coastlines, we do find that invasive species may move from areas perhaps south of where we are at the moment and begin to colonize our own ecosystems. This can have a devastating effect on things that live naturally in those ecosystems. And we're going to try to look at this a bit further down the line in this particular unit and what we can do about that. Moving on to the human threats, what we find, these, again, hopefully you've got these in your list. We have things like pollution and sewage, and these can come from runoff from rivers, perhaps from agriculture or from sewage treatment works. It could also be petrochemical-based pollution that come from shipping, which I've listed at the bottom, and other things like that as well. Obviously, going into fishing, we have things like overfishing as a problem itself, if it's done in an unsustainable manner. But we also have ghost fishing. Ghost fishing is when netting and fishing gear gets detached from the boat and then is left in the natural environment, and fish get trapped in that gear and therefore die. And this can lead to big problems in terms of overfishing as well. I've included litter. I think litter can include then links to plastics that you might have listed, and microplastics could be included in this, which actually comes from generally what we class as runoff rivers and sewage. Development, so this can include urban or rural development, but it can include things like building new hotels, it can include resorts and things like that. But it can also just include development in terms of building anything that is not linked to natural environment. Another one, again, this is something that links to Plymouth, is dredging. Dredging is done to keep a channel within a river or within an area, an estuary perhaps, to allow big boats in and out. And we will dredge a river to remove silt from the bottom of the seabed or the river in order to keep a channel open. Now, that dredging, obviously, it damages the ecosystem at the base of that river or seabed, and also that material that's dredged needs to be placed somewhere else, so it needs to be dumped in another area. So it has a double effect on that sense. We can have a look at this a bit further down the line in this unit. And then obviously shipping, and shipping can lead to problems through pollution, possibly sewage that can come from the ship itself. There are issues with the petrochemicals that are used to drive the boats, and there is also disturbance from the boat moving from through a channel or over a seabed, for example. Okay, so that's just the first kind of introduction to the unit, just to get you thinking about what we're looking at, and the threats that we compose to the natural coastal environment. And what I want you to start to think about is how we can start to manage this, as that will come up through the unit. What I'm going to do next time is I'm going to have a look at the different types of coastal habitat that we have here in the UK, and we're going to start to look at different regions of the UK and start to think about why we have such a vast array of different coastal habitats. So until then, goodbye.